All right, so for this next part of the lecture, I want to talk about forcing an input or an output on or off. Okay, and it is exactly what it sounds like. You are forcing something to either go on or go off. This is a very powerful instruction, and I want to make sure that you understand it and to be cautious with it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. Um, so, Forcing in a PLC allows the user to use your keyboard or your computer, okay, to force something to either an output or an input to turn on or to turn off. Okay, so what you're basically doing is you're saying ignore the program. You are going to be on or you are going to be off. Okay, there are so many useful functions for this. Okay, so many useful functions. If you have to, if you need to, if your process has gone bad because an output has started acting really goofy for a mechanical reason, you can go and force it off real quick. You can force it on. You can force outputs on so you can see if your program is running properly. Okay, without needing to actually go out into the field and activate the input. Let's say there's an input that's crucial to running a system, right? But you can't get in there. It's a proc switch in a machine and you can't get your hand in there to see what's going on. You can force that on, okay? You can force it off if you need to, all right? And so it doesn't matter what the state of the device is. It doesn't matter if it's on, doesn't matter if it's off. You can turn it on or off using the keyboard. There are a lot of steps in doing this for some safety reasons, which I will explain as we continue on. Okay, so here for an example is an input, right? So this input is in the off position, okay? And we want to force it on. And let's say we can't get to this to force it on, okay, for whatever reason. Let's say it's just too far away, it's not practical, it's unsafe, whatever. I can go into my program, and there's a couple of different ways to do this, but the way that I do it when I'm doing it is I right click on the instruction, input or output, in this case an input, okay, and I select force on. Then I need to go up to my control panel, my toolbar, and I need to activate the forces enable, okay, and that will force a 1 in there. You can also do it through the data table, which the video I think here will show you in a little bit. All right. And that will put that in there. And then these outputs will go on. So will any inputs as tied to an output will activate as well. By forcing this on, you are going to control an output, okay, in this case. All right. So here's a video. Now you'll notice they're doing this in the data table file, not the way that I talked about where you actually right click over it. It's going to do basically the same thing. Okay. In Logic Pro, maybe it just works a little bit different. Okay. You can see there's a forces on. This goes yellow to let you know that it's there. This no longer turns it off. But notice that the outputs are still on. Okay. The outputs are still on. So just be aware of that. Okay. You can force an output off or on. Okay, so here we have this output is off, okay, in the data table file, and we want to force it on. Again, you can right click on it and do forces and then activate the forces enabled, a little bit like the video showed you before, or you can do it in the data table file as well. Okay, so here we go. Now they're going to come over to the input, so that's 2, 5, come over to here, put a 1 in there, okay, and then make your force enable. Now notice you are in the run mode. That's something that I didn't mention. You have to be in the run mode for this enable to work, okay? So, all right. Now, by forcing outputs off, you can prevent the controller from energizing these outputs, even if the ladder logic is true. Okay, so you can actually force this thing off and on, okay? So I come over here, they're going to force 5 off, put a 0 in there. Again, you could right click on there and do force off, and you'd still have to enable it. There's typically a couple more steps associated with it, okay, because they really want you to be sure about this. And then that will turn off, and no matter what you do, that output, you can see here 5 is not turning on, okay? Disable it, you can remove all forces, and then you are ready to go again, and it will run in its normal operation, okay? So you can enter or enable or disable forces while you monitor your files offline, or while you're in the processor's run mode, okay, as well, all right? So there's a lot of different ways to do it, okay? So, sorry, I got a Facebook message posted up. Now, oops. Now, you've noticed that I have been somewhat nervous about talking about this. And because if you do this incorrectly, you can cause injury or illness to a person. You can activate an output, not understanding what's happening, and then an output actually go on. And it could hit somebody. It could send voltage somewhere where it's not coming. It could move and damage a part, a person, the equipment, the product, whatever. Okay? So before you start going in forcing things all willy-nilly, you have to have a true understanding of how the machine works. This is really, really important. Okay? And another thing that I get hesitant about forces is with, it's not unusual for somebody who's new to a factory coming in and they're looking at the PLC program for the first time. They'll come in and they'll look and they'll see a bunch of forces. Maybe like 5 or 6 forces on a really long program. Okay? What often happens with forces is they get used as a band-aid, okay? A process changes, so they go in and they'll just force off an output that's no longer needed, okay? And it's so quick, they don't go and disconnect it or anything like that, okay? I've heard some pretty bad stories about people, why has that force been there? It's been there for years. It probably doesn't do anything. Let's take it out. And they'll remove the force, and then all of a sudden, like a conveyor belt, like on 2 stories below, starts running, okay? That's dangerous, okay? It can damage, it can hurt a person, it can damage equipment, and it can damage product. Using a force as a permanent solution is a horrible idea. It should never be done, okay? For more reasons than I can even imagine, all right? They are a useful instruction for troubleshooting, especially at the beginning when you're beginning to program a new machine, or if a machine is acting goofy. They are an incredibly powerful function, all right? You need to be careful with them though, okay? You have to be careful with them, all right? Because they can cause serious damage and potentially life-threatening issues. So again, if you walk into a situation where you see like 7 or 8 forces, they've been there for years, no one knows why they're there anymore, it might be time to clean up that program. Okay, and it might be, before you do that, you need to make sure you truly understand what's happening. So be respectful, okay, of forces. All right, respect them, understand what they're there for, and utilize them when necessary. Not because you're so lazy you just don't want to go hit the start button. Okay, all right, that's a horrible idea. All right, although I see people do it all sometimes. All right, especially students when there's no danger, right? There's no product to be damaged. So just be cautious of them is what I'm trying to say. Okay?